What is up, everybody? Welcome back to episode 15 of Thinktwice, a weekly show where we talk about things going on in the world of Magic the Gathering, gaming, and pop culture. As always, I'm your host, Justin Parnell, joined by not my co-host, Ali Aintrazi this week, but instead joined by my good friend, Chris McCurry. This week on Thinktwice, we're going to be covering U.S. Nationals and Standard going forward, and Legacy and Vintage at EternalWeekend. So, Chris, you are not Ali Aintrazi.
Last time I checked.
That's correct. So, obviously, people, for the most part, unless they've been watching some of my Twitter responses, have no clue who you are. So, why don't you just give us just a little brief rundown, however you'd like, so everyone can get a little more comfortable, a little more intimate with the man behind the mask.
Sure. Well, like you and Ali, I'm from the great state of North Carolina, the greatest state in the Union. Unlike you, I'm a Tar Heel fan, not a Duke fan.
Well, we haven't covered that, but
that's
I mean,
okay. Nobody's perfect.
No need to open any wounds.
If you have seen Justin on Commander Versus, I grew up with two of his playmates, I guess you could say. Stephen Green
definitely
and Jonathan Suarez.
We don't say playmates. That's we're not Playboy models.
And I've been playing Magic since I was 10 years old, like most of you, I'm sure. And now I live in Roanoke, Virginia, and work at Star City Games.
And because obviously I talk about sometimes on the show when I'm the acquisitions manager, and you have two hats that you wear for Star City Games.
Two very different hats.
At the same time. It's actually really impressive. I don't know how it fit on his head, but it's a weird shaped head. He's got it's bumpy in different spots.
I thought we weren't going to get confrontational this early.
Okay. Fine. You brought up Carolina.
Yes, I'm the travel coordinator, which means basically for the Open Series, I set up flights, hotels, work with the venues, basically anything logistically that needs to be done. But also I am a human resources, so I am administration, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Not the enemy. Wink.
Yeah, basically I'm like third in line for the throne of the Star City Games empire.
That's pretty good. Third in line is it's heavy at the top though.
Heavy as the head that wears the crown, right?
So normally we kind of do a what we do last week. So I'll go first.
Yours is more interesting.
Mine is going to be more interesting. So I'm going to lead, and then whatever you say, you're just going to get trounced. But as I told everybody last week, I went to Busch Gardens with my girlfriend Meredith and her two sons, Levi and Parker, and it was a blast. I love roller coasters, love them. There's not a single roller coaster I would not ride. I always want to be in the front. It's fantastic. I've loved them since I was a little kid. Do you like roller coasters?
This may be surprising to you since, as you know, I'm not a fan of horror movies or
any sort of fear.
Being scared in general. But actually, yes, I really like roller coasters. So my family's from Ohio. I spent a lot of time in Ohio as a kid. And for any of you from the area, Cedar Point, I'm sure you've been. A lot of great roller coasters and definitely something I enjoyed. Something I don't do as often as I probably should.
Yeah, especially because you grew up in Charlotte, so you're you could throw a rock to Carowinds.
Yes, absolutely.
In North Carolina. So, yeah, it was a blast though, man. Busch Gardens, and this is the part that you would not like, since it's Halloween time. At 6:00, they start setting up what they call territories.
Yeah, sounds great. Sounds like a lot of fun.
They have all the different countries in Busch Gardens. You have France, Germany, England, Italy, etc. In each of the countries, as you're going through the country part, they have different people dressed up in different costumes that are literally just trying to scare the crap out of you.
They would probably be very effective. It does not take a lot to scare me.
So some of the ones there was in France, there are people dressed up as vampires. And the vampires, those are my favorite ones because they kind of blended in because there's so many people. They kind of blended in and they're just walking up beside you, just very casually. And then they
Right.
One of the parts was there were demons with chainsaws.
As if they needed them. Sure.
That would like they would like rev them and run up on you. One of them was like undead Vikings. It had these giant axes. And then the England one was like it was like in like Jack the Ripper world. So it was like they had like a bunch of different characters, but they had like women of the night, we'll say.
Sure.
And they weren't scary. They were dressed up in garb of that era, but they had these fans that'd pop out and then make a noise, and they'd do it like right in your face. So even though it wasn't scary, they were just trying to just get that jump scare. They're good at it.
It would not, if I was in an environment like that, I think just people that didn't even work there, just some random guy asking me where I could find the concession stand would just
be too much.
It's once I'm in that scared mode, which is not difficult to get me into. It's just the worst. I just don't understand people that like to be scared.
Oh my God.
Fear as a commodity. I've never gotten it.
And see,
I still don't.
I love it. I want to be, I like being scared, and I like scaring people. Like, I don't know. I just get like it gets my heart pumping. Like I had such a good time during the Hallow Scream is what they call it. I thought about like, I wonder if I could do this like part-time on the weekends, like dressing up as someone to like in one of the territories to scare people. Like I would love that. That'd literally be the best thing for me ever.
Like in October?
Yes.
Or just like in March and you still got the vampire thing going.
Me. Oh no, it was a blast. Yeah. My girlfriend's youngest son, Levi, who's 10, did not care for it. We went through the part that he liked the least was the zone that had the demons with the chainsaws. So we walk through and we finally get to the other side, and he is just like holding both of our hands like so tightly, like literally like trying to literally squeeze the life out of us. And then we get through, and then we're like, wait, where were we? What place were we going to go eat at? And we realized we had to go back through or walk around the entire rest of the park, and there was no way around it. And it actually turned out to be in the middle of it, so we had to walk back through the chainsaw demon area.
Yeah, and that's fine for a child. The problem is I would also be squeezing your hand.
Oh, there was some, but see, when we got to the place that we were watching, we got to see some adults get, literally, there had to have been this one girl who, at minimum, peed on herself. She jumped at least a foot in the air. She just got by this chainsaw demon.
Empathy for this woman. So we were actually talking about scary movies and how they kind of equate to spicy food, which is not another thing that I can't stand. And it's funny that where people rate scary movies, for instance, and this is my barometer that I use personally. Do you think Jurassic Park is a horror movie?
No, no one does. No one thinks it's a horror movie except for you. You're the only one.
Definitely a horror movie.
Oh my God, it's not a horror movie. It's not a horror movie. Look, I get you're put in scary situations, but that's like saying the movie Unfaithful is a horror movie. Are you scared of your partner cheating on you? Then that's a horror movie. Not
as scared as murderous dinosaur lizards.
You're right. One of them is significantly more realistic.
Running amok. I don't need realism to be scared.
Jurassic Park is not a horror movie. All right, we're gonna have to poll the audience. So you should let us know at Thinktwice MTG on Twitter. Is Jurassic Park a horror movie? Yes or no? It's obviously not. But even if we even get one response that agrees with you, I don't even need a majority. I literally need, like, if one person says that it's a horror movie, I'll concede it.
Come on, people, I'm counting on you. Would you be frightened if there were murderous lizards running around, opening up doors? Did you know they could open doors?
First of all, that's the velociraptors. It's not like all of them can. 2, it's nature. They're not hunting for sport, most of them. 3, it's no more scary than a person hunting you down. 4, it's still nature. 5, it's not a horror movie.
First off, 3 was it's no more scary than a person hunting you down, which is also very scary.
Yes,
being hunted in any context is very scary. Okay, people, you agree with me.
No, all I need is one vote, but I do not think it's going to get it. And I'm not saying if people say this is a scary movie, like, or not, are you scared during this movie at like one part? Because I was scared when I saw it when I was 6, but that's because I was 6 and I got startled. Okay, that's not the same thing. You're a 30-year-old man. You can't sit here.
You don't have to act tough. Dinosaurs are scary. All right.
Look, all right. Well, all we need is one vote. Let us know at Thinktwice MTG. All right, McCurry, what did you do this past weekend? Not ride roller coasters.
I did not ride roller coasters or watch Jurassic Park. Not much. As we're going to be talking about later, we're going to a tournament next weekend.
We are.
In Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And so I just spent time with the girlfriend. Didn't really do much of anything.
That's good. You got to get that time in, though.
Watched romance movies and football on Sunday. That was my entire weekend.
Okay. Well. Yeah, really way to put an end to that segment.
I'm sorry. We front-loaded it.
All right. So we are going to jump out real quick, and we are going to be back in just a moment to talk about the new Ixalan standard metagame from US Nationals. All right, so were you able to watch anything or take any information, reading, viewing, listening from U.S. Nationals this past week?
I actually did not watch most of Nationals. A lot more of Worlds, but it seemed very similar to me.
Yeah, I think and that's something that Ali and I talked about last week, is what we kind of expected going into Nationals is that the metagame was going to mimic, for better or worse, because it was pretty defined at Worlds that we had essentially 3 decks at Worlds. You had Blue-Black Control, you had Teamer Energy, and you had Ramunap Red. What we saw was essentially those decks joined by a couple of decks that didn't show up in force at Worlds, but were played a little bit more at Nationals. I know that Ali talked about Esper tokens a lot last week, and that's actually the deck that he ended up playing, and as it was appropriate since Ali was the reigning national champion.
The longest reigning national champion.
And will forever, unless someone wins it 6 times in a row, will always be the longest reigning national champion. I was going to make a joke to start the podcast to say that we kicked Ali off the podcast this week because he failed to repeat as national champion. And everyone knows we have to have one national champion on this podcast. So since he wasn't allowed back. But Ollie's he's a little under weather this week, so he'll be back next week. But he played Esper tokens, and he actually, as reigning champion, got the round 1 feature match.
Not surprising.
Yeah, on camera, which he demolished his opponent, was able to beat him with River's Rebuke, which is a really, really powerful card. Just bounced all of his opponent's everything, all but his lands back to his hand, and then won pretty easily from there. Unfortunately, as you guys probably know, Ollie did not repeat as national champion. So we had Oliver Tomaszko beat our good friend Jerry Thompson in the finals. And Oliver and Jerry will be joining Reed Duke, who was on commentary for this event, as the U.S. national team. So this begs the question. We saw what were the two of the most popular decks. The most popular deck from Worlds, which was Blue-Black Control. The most popular deck from Nationals, which was Teamer Energy. And arguably the most popular deck coming into Ixalan Standard was Teamer Energy. Between those two, do you think this is we're kind of now separating Teamer Energy and Blue-Black Control as a tier in the metagame?
Yeah, first off, I wanted to give a shout out to Jerry T. Like you said, our good friend. Congratulations. Mm-hmm. The national team looks great. Any team led by Reed Duke is going to be pretty good.
Yeah, it's good to start off with.
And it's kind of strange because you have a tournament like Worlds, which is this strange, warped, small metagame. Mm-hmm. So it's not surprising to see more decks come out of Nationals, but I'm also not surprised to see Teamer and Blue-Black Control at the top. They do seem to have separated themselves a little bit. I think Ramunap Red is right there, but to me, Teamer and Blue-Black Control seem to be the best. Teamer is just so flexible. It seems to be a deck that you can change every week to match what you think is going to be more popular.
Yeah.
And blue-black control has gotten some very powerful cards.
Totally.
Particularly a favorite of yours in the search enchantment. So
yeah, and we've talked a lot. I mean, we've talked for the last 5 weeks about Search for Escanta on this show. So you guys obviously know what we think of that card. There's a 3 of in Oliver's deck and his blue-black control deck that ended up winning. You know, Ollie and I both think that this is a card that's going to continue to see more play. Like, I don't even think this is at its height yet. Like, people are playing with this card, but I don't even think the true power of this card has been unlocked as really like one of the best 3 blue cards in the metagame, right after probably Torrential Gearhulk and
Gearhulk, of course.
And I don't know. You could anything that makes that deck go. You could censor, disallow.
Disallow is obviously very important. But the games where you have search on 2 just seem so unlosable.
Yeah, incredibly difficult
in most situations.
So one thing that we were looking at with Oliver's deck list is his ability to get search that he has 3 of in his deck list online as quickly as possible with 4 censor and 4 hieroglyphic illumination, completely skewing any Glimmer of Genius, which is in general is the more powerful card, but as far as flexibility, it's significantly less flexible, even though when you cast it, it doesn't do as much as Glimmer does.
No, but it gets that, like you said, it gets search online. And the games where you get search online quickly, you just never seem to run out of gas. You just go and go and go. And then when you start dropping, you know, your finishers, the Gearhulks, the Scarab Gods, Scarab God in particular, has been very impressive.
Yeah. Yeah. Anytime you see it, essentially.
There's a reason it's up to 45 ticks on Magic Online. I mean, that card is
over $50 in real life too.
The deck is just impressive. And I think cards like Essence Scatter being a 4 of is really shows you the decks they're trying to beat. Mm-hmm. Because the Temur Energy deck, like I'd said before, is, you know, very flexible and plays very powerful creatures. I mean, a card like Longtusk Cub, you can drop on turn 2 and can just go all the way and just take over the whole game. A card like Whirler Virtuoso can spread the game out and make it very difficult. And of course, Bristling Hydra is the biggest card possibly in the matchup total. So you see the blue control decks really transforming themselves to try to fight this Temur Energy deck. And for what it's worth, I do think Temur Energy is the best deck.
So let's talk about Temur Energy a little bit. We have Jerry Thompson, who I don't want, again, and this is similar to me talking about last week about William Jensen's deck, but for the most part playing a stock, and I'll put quotation marks around stock, a stock list. You have your common creatures, Longtusk Cub, Servant of Conduit, Rogue Refiner, Whirler Virtuoso, Bristling Hydra, Glorybringer. Your 4 Tune with Ether, Harness Lightnings. 2 Confiscation Coup, which obviously excellent at taking opposing Scarab Gods. But you also see, like you were talking about, you have the ability with Temur playing 3 colors. You have access to kind of a hidden part of the metagame. You have access to energy cards where other decks don't, if they're not focused on that. So you're able to have these any cards that you would want that use energy, even though Jerry doesn't have any that aren't in his main deck. But you've seen Confiscation Coup, which went from a sideboard card to is now being played in the main deck. So when you have the ability to play these kind of niche cards that other decks can't play, it makes it even more diverse, especially in a deck where you can go from a super aggro deck to a really control deck when you, after sideboard, when you start in the middle as something that's definitely a mid-rangey deck.
Absolutely. Essence
Scatter is something that we've seen become commonly played in Temur Energy. There's two in Jerry's deck, and there were a lot. I know William Jensen had 2 in his main deck at Worlds that he won that tournament with. So what specifically, as far as the transformational ability of Temur Energy, what makes you think that this is just the best deck when we've seen it kind of head to head for the last couple of weeks in major tournaments with blue-black control when one coming out on top each time?
Whirlo Virtuoso. It's my favorite card ever in Limited, for anybody that knows me.
Wow.
I just love that card is being played in a deck. But the real reason, I think, and I thought that Paul Cheon really did a great job of explaining this in his Worlds coverage, is energy is just such a powerful mechanic. The ability to cheaply, and it's almost like a throw on when you get it, but once you have it, the ability of some of these cards, the +1/+1 from Whirlo Virtuoso, the +1/+1 and Hexproof from Bristling Hydra, the mana, the Long Tusk Cub, you're able to do such powerful things. I mean, you look at a card like Attune with Ether, and it seems so innocent, but that 2 energy is really important for the deck. And when you think about it in terms of, yes, you're getting a land for 1 mana, but you're also getting 2/3 a 1/1 flyer, or +1/+1 counter on your Long Tusk Cub. Suddenly, all of your spells are under cost because of that energy mechanic.
Yeah, I think anyone who's played this deck, no one would say anything but that Attune with Aether is ultimately the most important card to the operation of the deck.
Absolutely. I mean, we talked about turn 2 search with the blue-black control deck. It's kind of the same thing. Games where you have turn 1 Attune with Ether just seems so much different. It just seems to snowball on your opponent from there.
Yeah, I think the fact that you're able to cut down on lands and remain. This is a threat-heavy deck, and it's not even like all of the threats are cheap. You have Bristling Hydra and Glorybringer, and then after sideboard, you go up to having, in some cases, having Chandra that some decks would want. Jerry doesn't have it in his deck, but to have like more expensive threats and still being able to play like a low number of lands, and then you have a card that gets you a land, so it's replacing itself, and then later in the game gets you 2 more energy to do all of those things you were talking about. Is like it is the most critical card to the entire deck.
Not to mention, you see some of the decks are splashing black for the Scarab God themselves, which again has been so impressive. And I'm kind of surprised that you didn't see Jerry doing that with this list. I thought, Brad Nelson, another friend of ours, he did that at Worlds, and I thought it was very impressive.
Yeah, I think it comes down to how sleek do you want your deck, because you do, to play the Scarab God, it's not like you're sacrificing a lot because it's almost free with Aether Hub, like virtually free. But you do have to play a small amount more lands, maybe just 1.
Sure.
And you are cutting some of your other threats, where the Scarab God is slower, but I mean, it's probably the biggest mirror breaker if you're playing another Temur energy deck that can possibly exist. It's essentially unbeatable, which is why you see Essence Scatter, because that's about the only way that you're going to get rid of it, that confiscation queue.
Yeah, and I think because this format is so creature-centric, you're going to see a lot of Essence Scatter. So maybe the way to go about that going forward is just to have a deck that can just ignore Essence Scatter completely.
So speaking of which, the other decks that I think we're going to see, that we at least saw in the top 8 of this event, were 1, because it was 4 Temur energy, 1 blue-black control, which obviously ended up winning. And then we had 1 Mardu Vehicles, Blast for the Past, 1 Abzan Tokens deck, which is pretty similar to the Esper Tokens deck that Ali ended up playing, but it primarily has Vraska Relic Seeker in it. And then the last deck was an approach, a blue-white approach deck, Approach of the Second Sun. This is something that this deck literally has no creatures in it.
Yes.
It has some on the sideboard, but it has none, absolutely none in the main deck. It's only creature, quotation marks around that, is getting into the trials.
And I think this is a deck, like I said, if you can ignore Essence Scatter going forward, you might be in a good place. So maybe it's just the case that it wasn't tuned enough. Obviously it did quite well. And then once you get to the top 8, as you know, one game of Mana Screw or Mana Flood, and suddenly you didn't win where the other guy did. And it seems like your deck is not as good, but it could be the case that we see a lot more Approach. Approach to the Second Sun seems very powerful.
Yeah, and I think kind of once you're in top 8, it no longer is relying on your deck list unless you have some deck that people don't know about where you're really relying on the unknown deck and the combination of cards that people aren't prepared for to win the tournament. But it kind of comes down to one, play skill, where the decks don't matter as much, and are you getting, I don't want to say lucky, but you have to be lucky to win a tournament.
Sure, I mean it's Magic. It's still a game. There's still
drawing random cards off the top of the deck.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think this is definitely something that is worth noting. Is anytime you see this type of deck, because this is like a pure control deck. Even you have blue black control, and it's still a pure control deck, but it's got like heavy hitting finishers in Torrential Gearhulk and Scarab God, where surprisingly enough, Essence Scatter is still a card that you want to have, at least in small part, against that, because they can't win if they can't resolve those. This deck does a pretty good job of being able to run you out of cards, resolve an approach, and even if you can't resolve one, you'll just get a second one. It just goes back into your deck. You just keep going. I don't know. It's an interesting strategy, one that we've seen before, and then of course the last deck that I think is going to be the new kid on the block is Abzan Tokens.
Well, one more thing about the approach deck too is you gain access to Fumigate, which is also going to be a card that you see in this Abzan token deck.
Definitely, yeah.
Which is something that the blue-black control deck does not have access to, which seems very good to me. The blue-black control deck, and it's a reason that it really depends on search, is you're basically 1-for-1 in your opponent until they no longer have any resources. Whereas Fumigate can really do a good job of catching you back up when you fall behind.
Yeah. And that was, Fumigate was my pick for Kaladesh card that improved the most in this metagame, going into Ixalan, and you're seeing both tokens decks, either Abzan tokens, Esper tokens, because obviously Ali's point for Esper tokens was it's the same thing as Abzan tokens, but instead of Vraska, which is really the only green card in the main deck of Abzan tokens, you get Search for Azcanta. And his deck was set up a little bit more to take advantage of instants and sorceries. And obviously we think that card's really powerful, so it kind of remains to be seen which one ultimately is better, but also takes advantage of Fumigate. Both versions do. The fact that you're able to have an Annoying Procession out, which is a really difficult permanent to remove. Same with Hidden Stockpile, Legion's Landing. All of these enchantments are really tough to get rid of. And it's almost like I don't know if you if any of you have watched this on coverage, it's almost like a combo deck. Because you get these enchantments out, and then you just need one spark, one revolt trigger on Hidden Stockpile to get going with your Annoying Possessions. Then you get your Anointer Priest, so you start gaining a bunch of life. Then if things get a little too hairy, you cast Fumigate. You can just keep starting over, over and over again.
Seems like something you would see Sam Black play at the Pro Tour.
It's exactly, literally something you would see Sam Black play. And I'd be surprised if this wasn't a deck that he was trying to perfect. I mean, that's where I think the metagame is. I think there's actually at least instances of the decks that made top 8. Teamer Energy, Blue Black Control, Ramunap Red did not make top 8, but obviously that's still a very powerful deck.
Sure, and we didn't talk about Ramunap Red, but I'm sure you guys are familiar.
Yeah, we've talked about that plenty. But that a sort of token strategy and approach to the second sun, I think to me that's going to be the new updated metagame, leaving Nationals and Worlds.
Absolutely. Is there anything that you think we didn't see that we may? Any cards, any decks, any strategies?
I think there's some sort of deck that's probably another mid-range deck that takes advantage of Carnage Tyrant. We just talked about Essence Scatter a lot, and that card, there's no way that card isn't good against Blue-Black Control.
So we didn't see a lot of Carnage Tyrant, but if you notice in the blue-black control list, he had Vizzar of Many Faces in the sideboard, which I imagine was specifically for that card. Mm-hmm. So obviously it was
They're
tested.
Respecting it, yeah.
And people thought it was good enough to sideboard against.
Exactly.
But nobody really played it, which I thought was interesting. It seems like that card is quite good. And maybe with people not playing it, the Vizzars will go away and then the Tyrant can come back. For you, those of you that know me, it is not going to be difficult to convince me that a green card is very good.
Yeah, yeah. As you always say to me, your favorite two things about green:
power and toughness. Love it.
It's got it in spades. It also has trample and
can't be countered. It's all you need.
And hexproof. It's a lot. It's got a lot of words on that card. So that's kind of. I don't mean dinosaurs necessarily. Although I think that Rivals of Ixalan comes out in January, and I feel like by then people are going to forget about dinosaurs. But as we've seen with a lot of tribal-oriented stuff, sometimes it takes the second set before you really see a tribe take off. Because we're only seeing half the dinosaurs that are in this block, and we're going to see more. They set it up pretty well. There's a few good ones, but I don't think you can't make a whole deck with Ripjaw Raptor, Red Star Alpha, and Carnage Tyrant if they cost 4, 5, and 6. Like, you're just other decks have too much time to set up or are already killing you. There's a lot going on, but I think that's something to watch out for. Just Carnage Tyrant in general. But speaking of dinosaurs,
yes,
one thing that is notable for this tournament is this was a 12-round event. 6 of those rounds were Ixalan draft, triple Ixalan draft. So a lot of the deck lists you might be seeing, especially like the 9th through 16th deck lists, I would pay careful attention to each of the people's records in the constructed rounds. Because there were only 6 constructed rounds leading into top 8, and there were just as many limited rounds, which I think is great for a tournament, but it's also, people rush to see deck lists from events, and I don't want people to think that just because this deck did well, X deck did well, based on the finish, that's the true story, because it might not be. You could very easily have someone go 6-0 in draft, and no doubt someone, I don't even know who, but I just know someone did that in 9th through 16th, and may have gone 3-3 in constructed just to get to it.
Sure, that's something you're always going to have to be careful with. Pro Tours is the same way. Any event you really need to, if you're looking for a constructed deck list, go to the undefeated constructed deck list, which are posted separately. But it's entirely possible that people that have solved formats generally play one format. So maybe their Ixalan limited game was not up to par, and they didn't make top 8, but they still went 6-0 or 5-0-1.
Or vice versa.
Yeah. Or vice versa.
Yep.
So
that's something that Ali was talking about. He felt really confident in constructed, but literally did not feel confident at all in limited. I think there's a lot of people like that. I would be the opposite. I would feel going in, and I think you probably would too.
I'm the exact same way.
Yeah, you feel more confident in limited than you are in standard. So
that's because it's way more fun to test limited.
Yeah, it is. I totally agree. So you've drafted a lot and played this limited format
quite a bit.
So why don't you give us? We don't talk about limited too much on this show yet, but Ixalan's kind of the first brand new limited format. So when we had our podcast with Emma Handy, she gave us a little rundown because she had done the pre-release the weekend before the pre-release. But that was primarily on sealed. So what do you think is, if you're drafting this format, what are you looking for?
Well, as you know, I just recently took down 2 weekends ago the PTQ at Star City Games Game Center.
Yep.
And that was actually one of my first drafts, that top 8 draft that I had done. I've done several since then, obviously. I think it's exactly what you would think. Tribes are very important. I think the first thing you need to realize in this set is that finding the open tribe as early as you can in the draft, and that's actually how I was able to in my opinion, take down that top 8 draft was I started off on Pirates, and within 5 picks, quickly realized that Merfolk was wide open. Moved into Merfolk, didn't look back, and my deck was great. Whereas 4 other people fought over dinosaurs, and their decks were obviously much weaker.
Yeah. So, something we were talking about before we started recording was like kind of comparing this format to Lorwyn Limited.
Right, which I didn't get to play. That was during my first couple years of college when I was kind of taking a break. But I've done a few flashback drafts, and it feels very similar. It feels like the colors are less important than the tribe that you're in.
Yeah, and I was able to play a lot of Lorwyn Limited, and a notable difference for Ixalan is in Sealed, the tribes aren't as good as having good cards in concentrated colors.
Right.
But for Draft, focusing on those tribal synergies is what's gonna turn your deck from a solid draft deck to a very good draft deck. And that was certainly the case in Lorwyn. You literally can't draft that format without being in a tribe. It's just not even possible. It's you would have to consciously avoid tribal synergies in drafting Lorwyn, and then you're going to end up with a bad deck. Now, I don't think Ixalan is quite to that extreme, which is good, but it certainly seems like you said that getting in on a tribe and making sure that you're focusing really strongly on that is what's going to lead to a powerful draft deck.
Right. I mean, because you have these mechanics for each tribe, you have cards that are specifically good with those mechanics and the colors of the tribes. So that's what will, I mean, obviously, if you just draft very powerful card pick after pick, but I think that the overall power level of the cards in this set are actually kind of low compared to the sets that we had just had previously, which makes it even more important that your cards all work together and kind of like, rising tide lift all ships type of thing. Also, in Sealed, you're right. It's more, I mean, it's basically any other Sealed format. You're not going to have enough of any particular tribe. Generally, luckily for me, that was not the case. I actually had a very powerful vampire deck in my Sealed. But generally, you're going to have a Merfolk deck, and you're going to fill in the holes with some dinosaurs. Or you're going to have a pirate deck that fills in the hole with some, merfolks, or so on and so forth.
Yeah.
It's really the power level, like any other Sealed format.
Yeah. So, okay. So if we're talking about tribal synergies being the most important, do you feel like there's a hierarchy for focusing on the tribes? If you open a pack and you have, a dinosaur rare and then a merfolk, a vampire, and a pirate uncommon, and you kind of just choose your destiny, where do you go?
Yes and no. Again, I think the most important thing is finding the open tribe and making sure that your deck from your first card to your 23rd, 24th card is more important. Mm-hmm. But I have had more success with, say, like dinosaurs and merfolk than I have with vampires and pirates. But I do think the vampires and pirates are very good if you get those decks. But the dinosaurs, as you know, like I said, green, I like to beat down. I like to just drop creatures and get in there. And there are some very powerful dinosaurs in this set.
Yeah.
Particularly for limited. You basically have Reality Smasher at uncommon, which is pretty absurd. I think that the Merfolk deck, when it comes together, is probably the best.
I will say the 2 best limited decks that I've seen were both Merfolk decks.
Yeah. The problem with Merfolk is that a lot of the cards that are really good in your deck are also good in some of the other decks. Mm-hmm. So it's tough to, whereas take Pirates, for example, that's not necessarily the case. So it's tougher to get that quote-unquote perfect Merfolk deck. But, man, when it comes together, like I said, in that draft, it was very clear to me that Merfolk was wide open. And another good thing about Merfolk is the uncommons are just so powerful. And, basically all of them. And I was actually able to wheel a few after that I'd passed previously for some pirate cards. And packs 2 and 3, obviously, no one was taking it.
Right.
And that because their ability obviously is +1/+1 counters, and that can get out of control very quickly.
Yeah. What is that? I can't think. I sat here for 3 minutes trying to think of the name of the card.
You're asking me for names?
The instant. Listen, you're gonna know this one. The 1 in the green instant, put a +1/+1 counter on target Merfolk and a +1/+1 counter on another creature.
I don't remember the name, actually.
I know.
Don't ask me for names. You know better than that.
I know better than this. Anyway.
I don't think I've ever fully read a Magic card from beginning to end. I just kind of get the gist, and I'm like, this is good or this is bad. And then if I play it wrong, my opponent will tell me. Which definitely happened in that tournament, by the way.
There was a PP or an IQ that you won with a Jund deck in Modern.
This is a good story.
Where you thought that
Blackcleave Cliffs
only came into play tapped the first and second turn because you stopped reading after it said second. So for those of you that don't know, this was my first Modern tournament since coming to Roanoke, I believe. And I asked Justin for a deck, and he was like, "This is Jund. This is all you'll need to play forever in Modern." Turns out he was right. But I didn't read all of the cards all the way through. Yeah.
So I spent the entire tournament playing my turn 3 Blackcleave Cliffs tapped. Surprisingly, my opponents never corrected me.
Yeah, unlike in Ixalan Limited.
In a deck with turn 3 Liliana, which I played on turn 4 way more than I should have. So after the tournament, I win, and I'm like, "You were watching. What did I do wrong?" And he was like, "Well, your sequencing seemed fine, but you played your lands weird a lot."
Yeah.
And turns out that's because I didn't read them.
Yeah. Powerful cards. They wanted to, that's why I think they wanted to reprint those or print the rest of that cycle in Kaladesh, just so you know, just to be clear that these come into play untapped on turn 3. They're pretty good. Okay. All right. Anything else on Ixalan Limited, anything at Nationals, Ixalan Standard at all?
Not really. I'm really excited for our team. For Reed, Jerry, and Oliver. It seems like a really solid team. Yep. Nationals is a really fun tournament. And I'm really excited for the Magic World Cup. It's kind of like, I'm not really a big fan of downhill solemn skiing, but during the Olympics, you put the Stars and Stripe on their chest, and suddenly I have an interest that doesn't make any logical sense, and I'm screaming my lungs out at the TV. So for the Magic World Cup, I just think it's a really good idea. Team tournaments in general are really cool, and when you make it national teams, you can't beat it. I think it's the most fun tournament to watch during the year, and I definitely will be tuned in.
I actually agree. I mean, I think it's even more important this year because for the last 5 years, we've had the Magic World Cup, but if you don't have nationals that creates that team where you had people winning and to get to a point, like I know that Jerry was super excited to get to the finals of this tournament, to be on that team, and that means so much to him. And if it's fine that you in the past have had people that have gotten on that team from having prolonged success over a year. You had the most pro points in the United States. The top 3 people with the most pro points end up being on the team, and that's fine. You're going to get very good teams like that, but it's God, the stories are so much better when you have people that are fighting for these teams, and it's just, I don't know. I think it's awesome doing it like this. And there was the World Magic Cup qualifier before, but Nationals is a name that means something.
It feels different. Being a national champion, it means something. You're right. And the Ali can tell. I mean, I'm sure Ali can tell you. Like, he was very, very proud. To have won that tournament, and it's really exciting to have it back. For sure.
Yeah, and Ali has won. I know. I'll talk about him since he's not here. But I mean, Ali has won an Invitational. He's finished in the top 16 of multiple Pro Tours, but he's won multiple Opens. He is that tournament and that title will always mean more. There's not going to be, unless he wins a Pro Tour, that tournament will mean more to him than any other event that he'll ever play in, for sure. I don't think it's close. So happy that they're back.
Congrats to Jerry. Congrats to Oliver.
Yep, it's gonna be a sweet team. I do think Oliver looks a little bit like Joffrey Baratheon.
That was a theme on Reddit and Twitter over the weekend. I thought that was very unfair. Very unfair.
To who? He looks like him. I literally did not even I didn't get to watch any of this tournament, but as soon as I turned it on, I was like, that kid looks like Joffrey.
I thought we weren't going to talk about Game of Thrones, but fine. Since you brought it up, it's very unfair to Oliver. Joffrey Baratheon is a character where his teenage death was like a national event.
Most celebrated TV moment.
It was worldwide news when he violently perished on camera. So yeah, I'm Team Oliver. Good luck. Good luck to the USA. There's some really strong teams out there. So
I'm just saying, he looks like Joffrey. That's all. Okay. All right. So we're gonna move on. We are gonna hop out for a minute, and then when we return, we're going to be talking about the Vintage and Legacy Championships at Eternal Weekend.
Vintage.
Now, Chris, before we get into actually talking about Legacy and Vintage and things that are going to be happening at the Champs events this weekend at Eternal Weekend, the day that we're filming this, which is Monday, this is earlier than we're normally filming because we're going to be going to this event, or I'm going to be going. Myself and our director and producer, John Choi, are going to be going to this event later this week. So we have to film a little bit earlier. The reason that's notable this week is the banner restricted list is actually coming out tomorrow morning.
Yep. And
this is equivalent of going into the World Championships where the banner restricted list come out the week going into Worlds.
The timing is not great. Luckily, I don't think there's going to be any changes.
Yeah.
Unlike the last banner restricted,
which blew it up.
Which completely shook up the format for you. Those of you that don't play Vintage, the last banner restricted was pretty big.
Yeah. Yeah, we covered last time that Monastery Mentor and Thorn of Amethyst were both restricted, which took, I guess we'll talk about how much they took the decks down a notch, but big those are big changes. But yeah, I agree with you. I don't think we're going to see anything tomorrow.
I hope not. I think Vintage is really good right now. I think most of the formats are really good right now. So I certainly hope not, but it seems like the last 2 years, every ban restricted announcement, it brings some shake up to some format. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah. And I think we've kind of been going through a time that's not, I don't know, it's been ban heavy and restriction heavy over the last year and a half in Magic, all formats really. So I think going through with a new set coming out, going through a full cycle with cleanly being able to say, standard, check, that one's fine. Modern, check, that one's fine. Legacy, check, that one's not fine, but we don't want to do anything about it. Vintage, check, that one's fine. All of those formats not being changing, I think is good. I think that's good for Magic. I think it's good when there's not these massive shakeups because mistakes happened. That being said, what do you want to happen?
So we're talking specifically about Vintage.
We can talk whatever you want, but you want to talk about Vintage.
Well, I mean, that's what I'm playing right now. So that's obviously where my mind is.
Okay.
I would like to talk to you, and you've mentioned this on the podcast before.
Yep.
And I heavily disagree with you. Not that I think workshops should be banned, but I do think it could be banned. I mean, I think that we both agree Mizra's Workshop is the most powerful card in Vintage that is not restricted. Would you think that's going on a limb? I mean,
I think that
the Black Lotus you don't have to sack.
I think it's either 1A or 1B with Bazaar Baghdad.
Okay, fair enough. I think it's better than Bazaar.
Yeah. Yeah, but you don't think it's a lot better than Bazaar?
No, I mean, they're both very powerful at what they do, but, graveyard decks, and let's be honest, Dredge, is a lot more niche than just play artifacts.
Yeah, sure. Well, we'll put it this way: when you can have any new artifact that comes out, regardless of the casting cost, and you have to look at it for, is this card good enough for a Mishra's Workshop deck in Vintage? That's probably pretty powerful.
Which is actually timely, since we just got a card that we can talk about from Ixalan that is good enough and will see play this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it goes back to this quote unquote pillar of the format argument, and I don't think you've ever fully explained this. So why don't you explain to the people what you mean by pillar of the format?
All right. In Vintage, there are pillars of the format, which mean there are cards that make up an archetype almost by themselves. Bazaar of Baghdad.
Right.
If you remove that, Dredge is gone.
Right.
Unplayable completely. Mishra's Workshop. If you remove that, Mud decks are gone completely. Unplayable. I completely believe that. And I don't know if you believe that.
I don't disagree with you there. I'm just saying, why is it this kind of like sacred cow that you can't remove?
And I think the last one.
Decks?
And I think the last one is Force of Will.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why can't you? Because this is what this format was founded on. It's literally holding up the essence of the format. If you want to go to somewhere where you can play with these cards, this is the format that you can do that with. If you remove these down to one-ofs, you are destroying entire archetypes. And they've proven that they can just continually restrict cards out of the archetypes if they get too much to be able to manage them, that you don't need to take the legs out from under them.
I don't even think that's necessarily true with Workshop. I think if you cut 3 Workshops out of the deck and replace it with other, because there's plenty of cheap mana sources for the deck.
Not like what they play them all.
No, I mean you could play City of Traders.
That's
way worse. Yes, I understand.
Way worse.
But it doesn't. I don't think it kills the deck.
I think you're killing the deck. I think you remove that consistency of being able to play all of these cards early and frequently and have your Black Lotus every turn. Because look, as much as you don't want to agree, being restricted to artifacts is a restriction.
In a lot of formats it is, yes. It is a restriction, sure, but it's not. In Vintage you're fine, obviously. It's well worth it.
Yeah, of course, but like if I think if your next best option is City of Traders, where the next land you play is you're binning, you
also have Ancient Tomb, which you're already playing.
You're already playing 4 of those. That's what makes up the deck. Like after that, where are you going? Where are you going for mana?
You could go in all kinds of directions. You could Grim Monolith. Like you could play more mana rocks. I mean, it makes you more susceptible to a card like Null Rod, but I think it's still playable. Keep in mind, I'm not saying they should. I think the Shops deck is actually fine the way it is right now. You just talk about it like it's not even a possibility.
I don't think it is a possibility.
Like it's this golden idol that can't be touched, and I totally disagree.
I think that it is. I don't think it's going to get touched. I don't think there's anything that could happen that would make them restrict Mishra's Workshop or Bazaar of Baghdad for that matter. I just don't think it's going to happen. I mean,
you don't think it's going to happen? You could not foresee a world where Wizards of the Coast makes a mistake and does another artifact block. And prints way too many good artifacts.
No, I can't. Those get restricted. I can't envision a world. I cannot envision a world where these cards are unable to be played as 4-ofs. Okay.
All right. We're just going to have to agree to disagree. Like Jurassic Park and horror movies, you are wrong, but that's okay. It's your podcast. I'm going to play nice.
We can make a bet on the podcast for $100. You give me the $100 now, and then I'll give you back the $100 plus another $100 if it ever gets restricted.
No. Because I don't think that it will. I'm just saying you could.
Yeah, you can't. Let's talk about Legacy.
And for what it's worth, I don't think you should. I think it's fine. I think the deck is fine. You think it's more fun than I do, obviously.
I do think
since you were going to be playing it next week, but
I am. Spoilers.
Spoiler alert.
We'll get to Ben in a second.
His round one opponent. He's.
But let's talk about Legacy a little bit. Now you're not going to be playing the Legacy champs this weekend at Eternal Weekend.
I'm not.
Okay, but I am. I don't want to say I don't want to refer to myself as like a Legacy specialist. It's only
you just did.
But now the caveat is it's because I'm not good at the other formats.
Right.
So it's like by process of elimination, I'm a Legacy specialist.
Sure. Hashtag humble brag.
No, not
Legacy
really.
Specialist.
Look,
Justin Parnell.
Look, I'm really good at exactly not winning tournaments at Legacy. I know that I'm going to play Delver of Secrets. And I know that I'm going to play Underground Sea. And Ponder, and Brainstorm, and Force of Will. And Gataxian Probe. And Deathrite Shaman.
Okay.
But I don't know the rest of the cards. Now, it seems like a lot. But I don't know if I'm going to be playing Young Pyromancer or Death Shadow. If I play Death Shadow, I don't know if I'm going to play like a Sultai Death Shadow or a Grixis Death Shadow. And I'm trying to figure out, and I'm not really going to do, I'm going to be honest, I'm not really doing any playtesting. I just need to decide where I feel like the metagame is going to land. Because I've played with all of these cards a lot.
Right.
And I'm really familiar with them. And I know how I know how each iteration of this deck operates, this Delver deck that I like to play. And I feel like I will pat myself on the back and feel like I am pretty good at this, at playing this deck. I'm good at playing Delver on turn one and getting it to flip by a sheer force of will, being on the top of it. But I don't know whether I want to play Thoughtseize, which I think is exceptional right now, because you're seeing a lot of these 4-color Leovold decks and other blue decks. And Thoughtseize obviously pairs extremely well with Death Shadow, just like it does in Modern. But that card's extremely powerful, but I don't feel like you can play it with Delver and Young Pyromancer. But then, of course, I want to play Lightning Bolt too, for the same reasons. All of these creature-based decks are exceptional, but Lightning Bolt, it's more difficult to deal with the threats, especially like Leovold, because even though it does the job, it can't deal with True Nemesis like Thoughtseize can.
Sure.
Thoughtseize, you get it preemptively. Abrupt Decay also.
And it's been a while since I played in Legacy. How prevalent is True Nemesis?
It's getting more prevalent.
It seemed like the last time that I was paying attention, this was before I moved to Houston, about 6 months ago, there wasn't a lot of True Nemesis in the format.
Now, that was shortly after the ban to Sensei's Divining Top.
My favorite ban of all time, by the way.
Yeah, and I can agree with that. I don't hate the card particularly, but
I do.
People
particularly,
but people think that they play a lot faster than they do with that card, and they don't. Right, and that's why it's gone.
Right, it's not a card that lends itself to fast play.
It's not.
You're not playing that so you can draw more threats to drop.
No, you're not.
Like, oh, I need more.
You're playing it so you can elongate the game, external of the card itself.
Right, and I think that the problem is people in the matches that, and this is why I don't play a lot of Legacy. For those of you that aren't listening, Sensei's Divining Top is a card where people seem to think it's okay to do it multiple times in a turn just because you forgot what order you did 30 seconds ago.
Or 10 seconds ago.
And it would just, I've literally, and Justin can tell you this, I have 1-0 dropped from a Legacy tournament for that exact reason, because I had such a terrible time playing against the card Sensei's Divining Top.
But see, now you can come back to Legacy, it's gone forever, and it will never be unbanned.
I feel like it's some sort of bait and hook. Like
it's just not.
They're just waiting till I get back into it, then
it's gone. But because that it's gone, people kind of forget, because it's been legal, and Miracles has been gaining in popularity up until the point of Top being banned. True Nemesis was a card that was everywhere in Legacy. And as Terminus got more popular, True Nemesis got significantly less popular, because if you're playing a 3-mana sorcery speed threat, that you're literally just asking for it to get wrapped away for 1 mana. It just doesn't work out. But now that that's gone, True Name is starting to get more and more popular as you see these creature decks starting to become almost ubiquitous in Legacy. And even if it's not the blue-based creature decks, you're seeing Eldrazi become very frequent. You're seeing even like these other, like a Jund style deck that has a lot, that leans on blue a lot less, become more popular. You're seeing big red decks become more popular. All of these decks have a really hard time fighting against a True Name Nemesis. Once it's in play, you're on a clock, and it's usually going to be packed up by some sort of disruption, be it counter spells or even burn spells in some cases. That's going to close the game in short order, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's obviously terrible against combo decks. Awful. So, if you're playing Storm, the card you want to see in your opponent's hand when you duress them is True Name Nemesis, because it does nothing. Actual nothing. Kind of these other big, I don't know, cards, the decks that don't get played nearly as much. Dredge, Belcher, also don't care about True Name Nemesis.
Jonathan Suarez decks, yeah.
Yeah.
That tier.
Yeah. But he plays Pyroblast a lot, which is good against True Name Nemesis. John Suarez is obviously, you guys know him on Commander versus most of you, but he likes to play Painter's Servant and all the shenanigans that come with that, which usually ends up being good against True Name. But anyway, yeah, I think that True Name is being more and more played, and I think this is going to be I do think this tournament's going to be kind of a crescendo for its re-entry as a threat you always have to pay attention to in the metagame. Like, it's not something that someone could be playing, but if you're playing a blue deck that has creatures in it, that you should expect it, rather than the other way around. But that's what I'm trying to figure out. Thoughtseize, Lightning Bolt, Abrupt Decay, they're all like kind of threat-oriented things. Well, removing threats, more or less. I know I'm going to be playing blue, but Flusterstorm is another card that I think is particularly good right now, just because it's a 1-mana spell that counters just about everything. As from a disruption standpoint, obviously doesn't get any creatures or Abrupt Decay, but it gets essentially everything else. The other deck I couldn't think of was Show and Tell.
You don't have to convince me. I mean, the deck you're describing is basically what I'm going to be playing in Vintage, just with slightly better spells, but basically the same threats.
Yeah, and those are, they're powerful. They're, I know, like Delver is like the deck that everybody loves to hate, but there's a reason for that. It's really good. It's, in my opinion, the best threat in the format, and I don't even think it's particularly close. I think you have too many good blue cards that are instants or sorceries you can pair with Delver and Force of Will to make it really difficult for your opponent if they're trying to play any sort of realistic fair Magic, even if they're playing another Delver deck. So you really have to be overly prepared for those decks. So that's what I plan to do. I don't know exactly how I'm going to do it, but I will be sure to update you guys, especially the Patreon supporters, with whatever the ultimate final deck list that I'm going to play is going to be. And during that, what are you going to be doing when I'm playing Legacy?
On Saturday, I think Chaos Drafts. I've never done a Chaos Draft. There's not a whole lot of information on the website as to exactly what packs will be drafted. Mm-hmm. The thing is, I hope that it doesn't go back too far, because while I would love to draft sets that I've never drafted, let's be honest,
I can read all those cards.
First off, the text on some of these cards, Jesus Christ. If I get an Ice Age pack, I'll just draft 2 packs. Some of the old formats were pretty miserable.
Oh yeah,
you get the feeling that
they're not. Some of them were not designed for limited.
No, some of them were designed for the ban restricted list. If we're talking about like Urza's Block, which was one of the first drafts I ever did. But yeah, I mean, I would love to go back and draft, Lorwyn, like we talked about earlier. Yeah. Maybe some of your favorite plain Kamigawa.
No, that's false.
Kamigawa's fine. I don't need to read the names, just the text, right?
Yep, I hate that part too.
Yeah, it'll be a lot of fun. I mean, obviously, I also like that I have to put no thought into it, unlike you in Legacy prior to, because I need all of my thought process for Vintage, which we both are going to be playing on Friday, and which is what I'm very much looking forward to. For those of you who have never been to Eternal Weekend, it is really awesome. It is really a lot of fun. If you don't currently play Vintage, you should definitely, at the very least, play proxy decks with your friends. It's a great format.
Yeah.
This is something that they had tried to talk me into for over a year, and I didn't want to play because I thought the format was a turn one format. It was way too fast. There's no interaction, and it's quite the opposite. It is a lot of fun. And now, of course, with the Vintage Leagues on Magic Online, with the Super League on Twitch, there's just a lot of Vintage coverage, a lot of effort being put. I mean, years ago, you would never see ban restricted list changes for Vintage, and now it seems like there's people putting thought into it. You look at some of the new cards, and you start to get the idea that some of these cards have kind of been printed with Vintage in mind, at least.
Yeah,
thought about, which is exciting. And so I guess, let's talk about our decks. Let's talk about, what we think about the format as a whole and what we want to play. Like I said, I'm playing Delver, and obviously you obviously think it's very good if that's what you're going to be playing in Legacy.
I mean, that's something, as you were talking about, we actually have a Vintage League in Roanoke.
Correct.
And I've talked about this in the podcast a few times. And in the beginning, actually, it started when the podcast started. Way back in episode 1, I talked about it, and I actually played a blue-red Delver deck for kind of the first leg of the last season of the Roanoke Vintage League, and that's kind of where we started talking about our list and like comparing what you were kind of looking at for blue-red Delver, what I had played for blue-red Delver, and
right. And I think your exact quote, if I remember correctly, was you won all of the games where you flipped a turn 2 Delver.
Yes.
Which unfortunately I am not very good at. It is not luck is not a skill that I possess generally.
And see, I'm putting flip turn 1 Delver on my resume.
Right. I'm putting it on my needs for improvement.
Okay.
But I'm going to try. Maybe I've been building up all my flips for this tournament, so I'm really looking forward to it. And it's one of those things where if you've played with it in Legacy, you see how powerful it is. I promise you, turn 1 Delver is still pretty good in Vintage.
It is. And it seems crazy because it's like people think that it's like all combo decks, but there's actually very few of those.
Right. And you have a lot of tools to fight that kind of thing too. Mm-hmm. As good as some of the, like you said, combos, finishers are throughout Magic's history, there's also a lot of good hate, a lot of good tools.
A lot of good disruption.
You still get to play with Force of Will, so
you get Mental Misstep.
Mental Misstep, which is a very powerful
powerful card. Never should exist, but here we are.
And funny enough, we're talking about all these powerful blue cards. You are not choosing to play blue, which I find kind of interesting, actually.
Yeah, this is as you talked about a little bit earlier. I'm going to be playing the card that McCurry thinks should not exist, and I'm going to play 4 Mishra's Workshops. And this is the second event. I played Eternal Extravaganza a few weeks ago, where I played shops, went 5-2 with shops, which was not bad. And that was my first big event playing it. I've played it in the Roanoke Vintage League before, but I still think, even despite the restriction to Thorn of Amethyst, which I'm still playing one of, that this is still the best deck because you do get to play with what is arguably the best card in the format.
You're not going to hear an argument from me. I think it is the best card in the format. Here's my problem with shops.
Tell me.
So, last Eternal Weekend, I chose not to play blue. And it seemed like all of my opponents were having a lot more fun than I was.
No. You know when my fun comes?
And I'm not going to make that mistake again.
Is when I sign that match slip, and I look up the clock, and it says 52 minutes, or 42 minutes left on the clock.
Yeah, and you pick up all of your spheres of resistance and apologize to your opponent.
I never apologize. They all deserve it. Look, I've been on the receiving end of this way too many times, okay? It's time for me to play these stupid cards on turn 1. I have no business doing. I'm playing Kaladesh cards in my deck. And Aether Revolt
is my favorite set, so you don't have to convince me.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, Whirlwind Virtuoso is what draws me to TV.
How could you not like this? I'm playing 4 Precursor Golem and 2 Wormcoil Engine in my main deck. This like the...
But you don't draw any cards. I mean, you get 1 per turn, obviously.
But it's an awfully good one. It's going to be good every time.
I don't disagree.
It's going to be good every time.
I'm playing like 15 cards in my deck and then a bunch of other cards to get to those cards.
Yeah. And see, I'm just playing all those cards instead. So I'm just going to draw them. And I'll draw some compilation of mana. Get to play with the most power. I'm playing my full complement of non-blue power in this deck. So all the Moxen plus Lotus plus Workshops. So I get like 10 pieces of power. So that feels pretty good. But I'm playing kind of a big Shops deck. Like I said, I have Precursor Golems and Wormcoil Engines.
Right, you mentioned the Wormcoils. You don't generally see that in a lot of the Shops decks.
Yeah.
Not at least in the main.
Yeah, a lot of the decks are is been 2 different aggro shops, which is kind of what this is being called. There's one that's going a lot lower to the ground that has Steel Overseer and more small creatures. But that deck is very susceptible to Null Rod and Stony Silence, which are in everyone's sideboards or main deck. Literally everyone. You're playing Null Rod and yours since you're playing blue and red.
Absolutely. And and that's, I think, to get off topic for a second, a big reason to play blue red is you're only playing a couple pieces of power and therefore
hate's minimal.
The hate against you in the form, because like you said, No Rod and Stony Silence are going to be in nearly everyone's 75. So
yeah,
if you can avoid hate that almost everyone is going to have, and you get to play that hate as almost like one-sided yourself,
yeah,
that seems like a good place to be.
Yeah. So instead of going the smaller route, I'm going more of the large creature route. I'm playing a little bit more mana and playing Precursor Golems and Wormcoil Engines. Wormcoil Engine is a card that is virtually unbeatable.
Cube Superstar Wormcoil Engine?
Yeah, it's so good. I took it out of my cube.
Yeah, this is true, people. And this is a man that knows his cube.
Yeah. Well, and I know a lot of you have been asking me specifically to talk about cube, and I promise there will be a time when it works in the schedule that we will have plenty of cube discussion. But Wormcoil Engine is a card that decks that are not playing white for Swords to Plowshares are going to have an extremely difficult time beating if it's ever in play, attacking or not. This goes for mirror matches as well. There's a lot of this Sultai Leovold deck that's been going around that I would say is maybe the most popular blue deck.
There's such disrespect that's been going around. You make it seem like...
First of all, this was the other deck that I was deciding between.
The deck's really good, people.
Yeah, this was actually both of the other decks that we were talking about.
Absolutely. I think it was literally both of our number 2 choices. Yeah.
But they could not beat Wormcoil Engine. They see it in your hand, they almost can't beat it.
No. I mean, I'm on Delver. If I see a Wormcoil Engine off a good taxing program, I'm just going to try to befriend you and hope you...
Hey, let's talk about this for a second.
Yeah.
You don't need to play that. Just play out these Precursor Golems instead.
Yeah, I mean, that's I mean, and I guess that is a problem with my deck, is there are a lot of threats that are must counters. I have to counter a Wormcoil Engine. I have no choice.
Well, your whole point is kill them before.
Yeah, unless you're at like 6 when you drop it, and I can fly over with a Delver and burn you. Yeah.
But I'm prepared. I tried out the card you were talking about earlier from Ixalan, which was Sorceress Spyglass. There's been a lot of talk about this in Shops decks. I don't think it's good enough.
I think it's quite good.
Yeah, I don't.
Now maybe that's because the first time it was played on me was turn 1, and they named Polluted Delta, and I conceded. But
yeah, I would see
because of the 2 deltas in my hand.
I don't think it's bad. I just don't. I don't think it's worth the main deck slot.
That's fair.
The time you're going to get double fetch land is going to be so rare. It's very good against dredge, and that is being able to have a main deck card that's good against them is going to win you some games for sure.
I mean, can straight up steal game one,
and it would, because they can't do anything. There's nothing they can do.
I think it's fine. I've seen as many as 4 in some decks, and that seems more than a bit much. But I kind of like the 2 of that a lot of decks are running. It also makes your Prexian Revokers better.
Yes, I mean
being able to see their hand, which is something
the reason that I like it.
Which is an ability that you generally haven't had before in shops. So you're kind of, especially when you're on the play, because turn 1 Revoker is very easy in your deck, because you're not keeping hands where you don't have more than 1 mana on turn 1.
Nope.
So being able to see their hand before you play Revoker seems very powerful. Otherwise, you're just generally naming a card like Black Lotus that you know everyone plays.
Or Dak Faden. Things that you feel
card like you can't beat, right?
Yeah, things you feel like your deck is your draw is gonna be weak to. But yeah, I don't think it's bad. I just want to be, since my deck is less disruptive with the bigger stuff, I'm wanting to have like larger threats. I'm not trying to end the game as quickly as these Steel Overseer decks or the Chief of the Foundry decks. I'd rather just hit you with a larger number of threats and have you continually have to answer them, rather than try to lock you out.
Sure, and you could definitely do worse than One Coil in that department.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so we're playing Blue Red Delver and Chops for us in Vintage, and I might play if it doesn't go well for me, I might sleeve up a little Blue Red Delver action myself, because I'm quite fond of that
for
deck
the
too.
5K on Sunday.
Well, I'll be playing in the top 8, but in the event that
okay, you heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen.
But the event that I lose in the top 8,
that's what I really like about you, by the way, is just humility. When I think it's Justin Parnell, I think humility.
And it's what I put on my job description.
Right, it's flips Delvers.
My resume, right beside flipping Delver.
I didn't want to tell you about it, but I do flip a lot of Delvers.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I appreciate that. It's always nice to be complimented on that specifically.
Yeah. So I don't flip Delvers. I'm also very bad with my targets on Lightning Bolt occasionally. So I'm really hoping that 2 damage to turn with Snapcaster Mages takes it home for me.
But it could.
It definitely could.
It definitely
it's a great card.
McCurry, if you don't mind, I'm going to post, because I'm sure listeners will be curious, I'm going to post your deck list as well on our Patreon.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Our Patreon page for
it's a deck you know well.
Subscribers.
You're the one that helped me build it.
Yep. So I'm pretty excited about that. Anything else on Vintage and Legacy specifically?
I also think that Blue Red Delver, for people who have played Legacy and are wanting to make the jump from Legacy to Vintage, I think that Blue Red Delver is a great segue deck. Because it plays very similarly to the way, say, a Rug Delver or a straight Blue Red, where you're using, cheap, efficient threats like Delver, along with counter spells and resource denial of Wasteland to, disrupt your opponent long enough for your cheap threats to get through. It plays very similarly. You're just basically plugging in some very powerful blue cards. Time Walk, Recall.
And from a monetary standpoint, which sounds crazy.
It is. It's because you're only generally playing 5 pieces of power. Recall, Time Walk, Black Lotus, Mox Ruby, Mox Sapphire. Now that is not cheap, of course.
No.
But if you're looking to play, and again, like we said earlier, we play in a league with our friends that is 100% proxies,
which we encourage people to play proxies.
Right, and I would have never been playing in a Vintage tournament with real cards had I not realized how fun it was playing with complete proxy decks.
Yeah. I'll back that up. I definitely encourage everybody who's listening to give it a shot. Give it a shot with your friends, and just make decks. Just make decks, whether you are looking at decks online or you just kind of want to see what you can do. It's a blast of a format. And if you play Magic Online, it's actually not that expensive to get into.
No, it is relatively cheap.
So,
Also, Super League. They're not a sponsor or anything, but it's just Super League on Tuesdays on Twitch. It's great.
Yep.
Check it out.
Yep. They're more vintage is good. Okay. I think that's going to wrap us up for this week. So we are going to take a quick break and be right back. So normally this is the part where we talk about what we're doing coming up, what we're doing this weekend. But you and I both, as well as director John Choi, who's going to be editing this as soon as we finish, we're all going to EternalWeekend in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Along with John Suarez, the human Sensei Divine Top. Yeah, it's gonna be a lot of fun. Can't wait.
Yeah, we actually have a group of 8 people going. And mostly from Roanoke, but now we're a little more spread out. Just to play some Vintage and Legacy. I think only a couple people are playing Legacy, but everybody's playing Vintage, and that's the main reason that we're going.
Right, you just don't get to play live Vintage tournaments very often, especially not one on this scale. So, just kind of the grandeur of it. It's just so exciting. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, the winner gets a portrait of a Black Lotus that is like a new art for Black Lotus. It's not like not from Wizards, but the art itself is pretty awesome. So that is my goal, is to get that. Lofty, but you got to shoot for the stars.
Yeah. Again, very humble. I'm looking for like 13th place. Maybe some store credit. Of course, yeah, first place.
Well, hey
guys, I'm going to a tournament. I'm really hoping to win.
I want that art, and that's. But see, I need that. I need that to drive me. Like during the tournament, like in between rounds, to have a goal. Because when I feel like I'm just happy to be there and wanting to just have a good finish, that's when I feel like I don't play as tight. I mean, last year I lost playing in the last round where I thought was going to be for top 8. If I had won, I would have got 9th. Ended up getting 31st. So
9th, the Justin Parnell special.
It is the Justin Parnell special. Most recently, it's been 2nd place. So
that's better than 9th.
It is better than 9th. It feels much worse.
Not in this tournament. This tournament's going to feel way worse.
Yeah. So we'll. That's what I'm hoping for. Hope we can do well in Legacy too. But I really want a good finish in Vintage. I played a lot of Vintage this year, so. But obviously, thank you guys for listening to me and my good friend Christopher McCurry over here talk. Ali is going to be back next week. He had, like I said, he was a little under the weather and was not able to join us this week, and we had to get this one out earlier in the week lest we canceled the episode for this week, and we didn't want to do that. So I want to thank Christopher, you, for being here, for filling in for Ali.
Thanks for having me.
Yep. And I know that a lot of you have enjoyed our Vorthos discussion when we talk about Magic Story. I want you guys to know we are 100% going to talk about that next week, so you will not have to wait any longer. It just didn't work out this week with Ali being here. I did not want to talk about anything without getting his insight, as we both love to talk about Magic Story. So we're going to talk about that next week. We're also, we've been a little light on the pop culture, and I know a lot of you guys have asked me about that specifically. We are definitely going to get back on talking about movies, TV shows, a little bit of music that I want to talk about very soon.
But not trailers, because he doesn't watch trailers. I wanted to talk about Star Wars for what it's worth, but he has not seen the trailer.
Oh, I don't watch trailers. Once I decide I want to see a movie, I'm out on the trailers. I don't watch them at all.
I have to watch trailers. That's how I decide. Because I talk to people like you, and you're like, you should watch Jurassic Park. And I'm like, is it scary? And you're like, no. And then I watch the trailer, and I'm like, yeah, it is. It's super scary.
I don't watch them. Once I decide I want to see a movie, then I cut off from trailers. I don't not watch them if I don't know.
Fair enough.
If I know I want to see it, then I don't watch it. I haven't seen this The Last Jedi trailer because I know I want to see Star Wars. You know when I knew I wanted to see Star Wars? when they announced like 4 years ago they were making another Star Wars trilogy. I knew I wanted to watch this movie, so I don't need to see a trailer. Why would I want to watch it? It's just going to spoil stuff. It's just not necessary. I don't need to see any trailers for Thor Ragnarok. I know I'm going to go see that. I don't need to see any trailers for like Stranger Things on Netflix. I know I'm going to watch that. I don't need to see any trailers. I don't need to see trailers for anything. Once I've decided, I'm out. Then I'm done. No more. No more media.
You want to know a secret? That is one of my favorite parts of the movies. I wish they would play 15 more minutes of trailers.
No, why? Why?
Because they're fun. It's like the funnest part of the movie's usually just disappointing.
Well, stop going to disappointing movies. That's on you.
I've seen a lot of really good trailers for a lot of really bad movies. And it's like, if only I could have remembered you how you were, you know?
Yeah, but then you just know that those movies that you're going to see on those trailers are going to disappoint you further. So it's like a perpetual cycle of disappointment based on your desire to see those trailers.
Story of my life.
Is that what you want to be? You and Ali, he only sees movies once.
See, I don't know which is weirder. The fact that you won't watch it's definitely actually only seeing movies once.
Definitely only seeing movies
once. That's really weird.
Yeah.
Sorry, Ali, but that is very strange.
Yeah, that's look, I'm not trying to dog him.
On Saturday, Superbad was on. I watched it back to back because it came on immediately after. Yeah. I watched it immediately back to back, and it was very enjoyable.
And same with TV shows. Once he's watched it, for those of you on Commander Versus, everyone who watches Commander Versus knows that my favorite television show of all time is It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. It just so happens that Christopher McCurry,
it's the one thing we agree on, yeah,
and all of the world, is also his favorite. If not, is it your most favorite, or is it in the top one or two?
All time?
Yeah, all time.
It's probably, I think we had this conversation the other day on best versus favorite.
Favorite.
Yeah, I think it is my favorite.
Favorite? Okay.
Yeah.
So
it's close. I really like Breaking Bad and Game of Thrones and The Wire.
Mm-hmm. Those are all
the shows that everyone else on Earth that has seen them likes.
I don't even know where I was going with this. I just started talking about anyway.
Watch Always Sunny in Philadelphia, everyone.
Oh yeah,
Wednesday nights on Comedy Central.
It's not on Comedy Central or on Wednesdays. Don't do that at all. But I've seen
the reruns are definitely on Comedy Central.
Are they?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't watch Comedy Central. Anyway, I've definitely seen every episode of that show at least 4 times now, and most of them well into the double digits. I watched the episode Mac Day. In the last month, I watched it 8 times.
Yeah, I watched it twice.
It's great. Anyway.
So play Vintage and watch Always Sunny if you take anything away from this podcast.
That's right. All right, Christopher, where can people find you on the internet? Actually, what's your address? Can you give them your...
Yeah, well, first they need my social, right?
Security number, yeah.
But we're also going to be posting a picture of my face, so if you want to use that to ruin my credit, that'd be great.
Yeah, we also have some childhood pictures.
So, really the only place I'm at other than real life Roanoke, Virginia is Twitter, at McCrispy86, MCCRISPY86.
So I'm
on Twitter. Reach out. Only positivity, though. No negativity.
Like Jurassic Park.
Yeah, you can. I'll argue with you about Jurassic Park. That's fine. That's not really... But...
You can find me, as always, on Twitter. You can follow me at jparnell1 on Twitter. And, of course, I'm the host of the Commander vs. Series on StarCityGames.com and YouTube every Wednesday, 11 a.m. We're there playing some Commander. We're in the middle of Season 9. It's going okay. We are, as most of you know, we're in between our randomonium, where we build random decks for each other. And that's always... But from a deck building perspective... a playing perspective, and I think from a viewership perspective, this is like the most fun part of each of our seasons. So if you haven't checked it out this week, you should definitely go back and look. And if you are listening to this later, or if you're listening to this now, you should look forward to next week where we're going to have another one. So super excited about that. Of course, if you would like to follow the show you can do so. ThinktwiceMTG on Twitter. If you would like to email us, thinktwicemtg@gmail.com. You can, of course, find the show on SoundCloud, iTunes, and YouTube. We would love for you to share the show. That's the easiest way for us to get the word out that this show exists. We're still trying to get off the ground. If you have any nice things to say, feel free to leave a comment on any of those platforms, especially leaving a review on iTunes. That would be super awesome. You can also support the show on Patreon, patreon.com/thinktwicemtg. We have two tiers that you're able to support the show. We have our $1 Alger Bolus tier that gets you the show 24 hours in advance. The show goes live on Saturday, but goes live on Friday for all Patreon subscribers. We also have a $5 Disciple Bolus tier, and that allows you to get the show early, as well as see all of our blog posts that Ali and I make. This week, I'm going to make sure that I post all of our my Vintage and Legacy deck lists and McCurry's Vintage deck list this week. And hopefully, sometime in the next week or so, Ollie will have another post up as well, more deck lists from him. So you definitely want to follow that. We're also working on some more stuff for Patreons that we're probably just going to throw on the $5 tier. So please, if you can, support the show through Patreon. And if you're not able to do that, please share the show. That is definitely the best way to get this out. We also want to give a special thanks to our director and producer, John Choi, and of course, our graphic designer, Amber West. We cannot do either of this without them. And of course, this week, special thanks to our guest, Chris McCurry. I literally have not done it without you this week, as you filled in admirably for Ali Aintrazi.
Positivity, people. Positive comments only.
All right, guys. Thank you guys very much for listening. We love you very much. Ali, I love you out there.
Love you, buddy.
I love you too, Christopher.
Yeah, that's fine. I thought you were going to leave me out, so I just kind of
I didn't leave
threw myself in the middle there.
No, I love you too. All right, we love you guys. Thanks for listening. Talk to you next week.
Peace.